On the 4th of July, while America dressed itself in red, white, and blue, Emma Bennett stood behind the glass walls of the Whitmore mansion and watched other people celebrate freedom. Outside, children waved tiny flags, families laughed over barbecue smoke, fireworks waited in the evening sky like promises. But inside that marble house, Emma wore Maid's uniform and carried a tray of medicine for a man who had stopped believing in life. She was only 26, yet her future had already been sold. Years earlier, the man she called father had signed a contract with the billionaire Whitmore family. In exchange for money, Emma would serve and care for Ethan Whitmore for as long as he lived. No college, no love, no leaving, no choice. On the very day America celebrated independence, Emma was living proof that a person could be surrounded by wealth and still be trapped like a prisoner. And Ethan Whitmore was no freer than she was. Once a powerful young billionaire, Ethan had vanished from the world after the accident that left him in a wheelchair. He hated crowds, he hated pity, he hated mirrors most of all. But when he saw Emma silently crying while watching the Independence Day parade through the window, something inside him broke. For the first time in years, Ethan asked to go outside. Not for business, not for the press, not for himself, for here. That afternoon, among thousands of strangers, he bought Emma her first ice cream. She smiled with tears in her eyes, tasting freedom for the first time. But happiness lasted only a moment. In the middle of the crowd, Ethan's enemies saw him unprotected and sent a man with a knife. Before Ethan could move, Emma threw herself in front of him. If this story already has your heart, stay until the end and subscribe, because the girl everyone treated like property was about to become the one person a billionaire would tear the entire city apart to find. Emma Bennett was supposed to be invisible. Ethan Whitmore was supposed to be broken. But on the day America celebrated freedom, both of them were about to discover that the cruelest prisons are not always locked with keys. After the world had already seen Emma Bennett standing behind the glass, watching America celebrate a freedom she had never truly owned, the morning inside the Whitmore mansion began with silence. Outside the gates, the 4th of July was alive. American flags hung from porches. Children ran down the sidewalk with red, white, and blue ribbons tied around their wrists. Somewhere beyond the tall iron fence, a marching band was practicing for the parade, its drums rolling through the warm summer air like a heartbeat. Fathers were lighting backyard grills. Mothers were carrying bowls of potato salad and lemonade. Teenagers laughed beside pickup trucks decorated with streamers. The whole country seemed to be saying the same thing at once. Today, we are free. But inside the mansion, Emma was folding a white linen napkin beside a silver tray of pills. She was 26 years old, with tired brown eyes, soft hands roughened by work, and a face that had learned to hide pain before anyone could ask about it. Her maid's uniform was clean, pressed, and perfectly buttoned. In the Whitmore house, even suffering had to look presentable. From the small service hallway, she could see the front lawn where the family staff had already placed flags along the stone path. The colors moved gently in the wind, bright and proud. Emma stared at them for 1 second too long before lowering her eyes. She had no right to dream today. Not about the parade, not about fireworks, not about walking through a crowd with a paper cup of lemonade in her hand like any other young woman in America. Her life had been signed away years ago. Roy Bennett, the man she had always called her father, had made sure of that. He had sat across from the Whitmore family's lawyers and put his name on a contract that turned his daughter into someone else's obligation. The words had sounded polite on paper: private care, lifelong assistance, financial settlement, family agreement. But Emma knew what they meant. She would care for Ethan Whitmore as long as he lived. She could not leave without permission. She could not go back to school. She could not take another job. She could not fall in love with anyone who might ask her to choose herself. Her future had been traded for a debt she never created and a sum of money she never touched. And the cruelest part was that everyone called it opportunity. People saw the mansion and thought Emma was lucky. They saw the marble floors, the chandeliers, the grand staircase, the ocean blue swimming pool behind the house, and they imagined comfort. They did not see the tiny room near the laundry area where she slept. They did not hear the way Roy's voice still lived inside her head. warning her that girls like her survived only by obeying. They did not understand that a cage made of gold was still a cage. At 8 o'clock, Emma carried the tray up the wide staircase to the second floor. Ethan Whitmore's room was at the end of the east wing, where the sunlight reached first in the morning and stayed longest at dusk. Before the accident, people used to call him the golden heir of the Whitmore empire. He had been young, brilliant, and untouchable, the kind of billionaire who walked into a room and made everyone else stand straighter. Then came the crash. Now Ethan lived behind closed doors, sitting in a wheelchair beside windows he never opened, watching a world he refused to enter. He hated visitors. He hated reporters. He hated the careful voices people used when they spoke to him, as if his broken body had turned him into a fragile object. Most of all, he hated being pitied. Emma knocked twice. No answer. She entered anyway because that was part of her job. Ethan was by the window, dressed in a dark sweater despite the July heat, his hands resting on the wheels of his chair. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw sharp, his face handsome in a cold, distant way. But his eyes looked empty, fixed on the front gate where cars were already arriving for the Whitmore Independence Day gathering. His mother, Margaret Whitmore, had planned the party for donors, business partners, and old family friends. There would be champagne, lobster rolls, live music, and fireworks from the terrace. The guests would praise America, success, family, and legacy. They would smile for photographs. They would ask polite questions about Ethan and accept polite lies in return. Emma placed the tray on the table. "Your medication, Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly. Ethan did not look at her. "I know what it is." She nodded, used to the coldness. She poured water into a glass and set it near his hand. From outside, a child's laughter floated up from the driveway. Emma's eyes moved toward the window before she could stop herself. Across the street, beyond the gates, a little girl in denim shorts was holding her father's hand and jumping over cracks in the sidewalk. Her face was sticky with melted popsicle, and she was laughing like the whole day belonged to her. Emma's throat tightened. Just once, she wondered what it would feel like to be that free, to walk outside without asking, to buy an ice cream because she wanted one, to stand under fireworks without worrying that someone would call her back inside. "You want to go out there?" Ethan's voice startled her. Emma turned quickly. "I'm sorry." He was looking at her now, really looking, with a sharpness that made her feel exposed. "You keep staring at the street," he said. "Do you want to go?" Emma forced a small smile. "It's nothing, sir." "That wasn't what I asked." She lowered her gaze. "I've never been to a 4th of July festival, not as a guest." The words left her before she could swallow them back. For a moment, the room became painfully still. Ethan's expression changed, but only slightly. "Never?" Emma shook her head. "I usually work during holidays." "Always?" She looked toward the window again, where the little girl had now climbed. "Always," Emma said. "But it's all right. I'm used to it." That answer stayed in the air between them. Ethan turned back to the glass. Outside, people were arriving to celebrate independence at a house where neither he nor Emma felt free. He had locked himself away because the world made him feel broken. She had been locked away because someone else had decided her life did not belong to her. For the first time in months, Ethan saw someone else's prison more clearly than his own. Downstairs, music began to play. Margaret's voice floated through the hallway, warm and perfect for guests. A waiter laughed. A cork popped. The holiday had officially begun. Emma picked up the empty medicine cup and stepped back. "I'll return with your breakfast," she said. "No." She stopped. Ethan placed both hands on the wheels of his chair and turned away from the window. "Get my jacket." Emma stared at him, confused. "Your jacket?" "Yes. Are you going downstairs?" Ethan's eyes moved past her, toward the door, toward the world he had avoided for so long. "No," he said. "We're going outside." Emma froze, certain she had misunderstood. Ethan's voice remained cold, but something under it had changed. "It's Independence Day," he said. "Someone in this house should know what freedom feels like." Ethan's words stayed in the room like a match dropped into dry grass. "It's Independence Day. Someone in this house should know what freedom feels like." For a moment, Emma Bennett did not move. She stood beside the medicine tray, her fingers still wrapped around the empty glass, wondering if she had heard him correctly. Ethan Whitmore had not left the mansion for anything other than hospital visits and private medical appointments since the accident. He had missed charity galas held in his own name. He had ignored business ceremonies where people waited hours just to see him. He had refused family dinners, interviews, and every holiday gathering Margaret Whitmore had ever arranged to prove to the world that her son was still strong. And now he wanted to go outside because a maid had looked sad through a window. "Mr. Whitmore," Emma said carefully, "your mother is hosting guests downstairs. I know. She won't like this. She rarely likes anything I do. You have not been outside in a crowd for a long time." Ethan's jaw tightened. For a second, Emma thought he might change his mind. Instead, he rolled his chair toward the closet with more force than necessary. "Then it is probably time." Emma did not know what to say. A part of her wanted to obey quickly because obedience had always been the safest way to survive. Another part of her wanted to step back, to warn him, to remind him that people stared, that crowds pushed, that reporters could be anywhere, that the Whitmore name attracted attention even when the family begged to be left alone. But under all of that was something smaller and more dangerous. Hope. She hated how unfamiliar it felt. She took Ethan's dark jacket from the closet and held it out. He reached for it himself, refusing help at first, then stopped when one sleeve caught against the armrest of his chair. His face hardened instantly, the way it always did when his body betrayed him in front of someone else. Emma did not rush. She did not pretend not to notice. She simply stepped closer and adjusted the sleeve with the same calm care she used when fixing a curtain or folding linen. "There," she said softly. "I didn't ask for help." "No," Emma replied, "but you needed it." Ethan looked up at her, sharp and annoyed, but she had already stepped back. That was one thing about Emma Bennett that confused him. She was afraid of many things. He could see that clearly, but she was not afraid of his anger in the way other people were. Nurses flinched. Servants lowered their eyes. His mother corrected him with polished cruelty. Emma simply stayed. They were halfway down the hall when Margaret Whitmore appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She was dressed in a cream-colored suit with a pearl necklace and a small American flag pin on her collar. Every inch of her looked prepared for guests, photographs, and applause. But when she saw her son in his wheelchair near the elevator with Emma behind him, the pleasant mask on her face cracked. "Ethan," she said, "where are you going?" "Out." Margaret's smile vanished. "Out where?" "To the festival." The silence that followed was so complete, Emma could hear the muffled music from the garden below. Margaret walked toward them slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Emma, and in that one glance Emma felt herself being blamed for something that had not yet happened. "Absolutely not," Margaret said. "The house is full of people. The press may be outside. It is crowded, hot, unsafe, and unnecessary." Ethan's expression did not change. "Then don't come." "This is not a joke. I'm not laughing." Margaret lowered her voice. "Do you understand what will happen if people see you like this?" Emma saw Ethan's hands tighten on the wheels of his chair. "Like this." Two small words, but they hit harder than a slap. Ethan did not look wounded. He looked colder, which Emma was beginning to understand was the way he kept pain from showing. "You mean alive?" he asked. Margaret went still. "That is not what I meant. It sounded exactly like what you meant. Ethan, I am trying to protect you." "No," he said. "You are trying to protect the version of me you can still sell to people." Margaret's face paled. Downstairs, laughter rose from the guests in the garden, bright and careless. The whole mansion was wrapped in celebration, but the hallway above it felt like a battlefield. Margaret turned to Emma. "You," she said, her voice quiet but cutting. "Take him back to his room." Emma's stomach tightened. For years, she had obeyed voices like that. Roy's voice, Margaret's voice, any voice that sounded powerful enough to punish her. Her hands almost moved toward Ethan's chair out of instinct. Then Ethan spoke. "She works for me today." Margaret looked back at him. "She works because of a contract your family paid for." Emma lowered her eyes at the word contract, but Ethan saw it. He saw how quickly the light left her face. The anger that moved through him then was not loud. It was clean and silent. "Then consider this my instruction," he said. "She is coming with me." Margaret stepped closer. "You are making a mistake." Ethan rolled past her. "It would not be my first." Emma followed him into the elevator with her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. When the doors closed, the music from downstairs disappeared, and for a few seconds they were alone in the small mirrored space. Ethan kept his eyes forward. "You can still say no," he said. Emma looked at him in the reflection. "Can I?" The question was so honest that Ethan had no answer. The elevator opened before he found one. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass, barbecue smoke, sunscreen, and summer heat rising from the pavement. The festival had spread through the streets beyond the Whitmore gates, filling the neighborhood with color and noise. A police cruiser blocked one end of the road for the parade. Food trucks lined the sidewalks. Children held sparklers that would not be lit until sunset. Somewhere nearby, a man was singing an old country song through a portable speaker, and strangers were clapping along because today everyone wanted to believe they belonged to something bigger. Ethan had insisted on taking only 2 security men, both keeping their distance. He did not want a wall of suits around him. He did not want people moving aside like he was an emergency. He wanted, for one afternoon, to disappear inside ordinary life. But ordinary life did not know what to do with Ethan Whitmore. People recognized him. Emma noticed the glances first. A woman near the lemonade stand whispered to her husband. A teenager lifted his phone before his mother pulled his hand down. An older man stared at the wheelchair, then looked away too late. Ethan's shoulders stiffened with every pair of eyes that landed on him. Emma slowed her steps beside him. "Do you want to go back?" she asked. "No." His answer came too fast. She nodded and kept walking. The street opened into the main festival square, where red, white, and blue banners crossed above the crowd. A brass band played near the courthouse steps. Vendors shouted over one another. Children chased bubbles through the air. The smell of grilled corn mixed with hot dogs, sugar, fried dough, and melting asphalt. Emma had seen festivals through windows before, but standing in the middle of one felt different. The noise did not sound like chaos to her. It sounded like permission. Permission to laugh. Permission to want something. Permission to be nobody's servant for a few minutes. She stopped near a cart, painted with stars and stripes. A young man in a paper hat was scooping ice cream into cups. Vanilla, strawberry, blueberry, chocolate, cherry. The colors were bright and almost childish, the kind of thing Emma had only ever carried to other people's tables. Ethan noticed. "What flavor?" Emma blinked. "What?" "You've been looking at that cart like it owes you an apology." She shook her head quickly. "I don't need anything. That was not the question. I'm fine, Mr. Whitmore." "Ethan." She looked at him. He repeated, lower this time, "My name is Ethan, at least while we are outside." The words embarrassed her more than she expected. She looked back at the cart and folded her hands in front of herself. "I've never had one from a place like this," she admitted. "An ice cream? Not one someone bought just for me." Ethan stared at her for a second, as if the sentence had entered him slowly and settled somewhere uncomfortable. Then he rolled toward the cart. "1 vanilla, with strawberries and blueberries," he told the vendor. "And whatever she wants after that, if she changes her mind." The young vendor smiled. "Celebrating the 4th? Ethan glanced at Emma. "Something like that." When he handed her the cup, Emma took it with both hands. The ice cream was already beginning to soften at the edges, white cream streaked with red syrup and dark berries. It was simple, cheap even. Nothing like the dessert served inside the Whitmore mansion on crystal plates. And somehow it felt more precious than anything Emma had ever touched. She took a small bite. The cold sweetness hit her tongue, and with it came a feeling so sudden she had to look away. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Ethan saw. "It's bad?" Emma laughed once under her breath, but the sound broke. "No." "Then why are you crying?" She wiped quickly at her cheek, ashamed. "Because I don't know what to do when something is only mine." The festival moved around them. A boy ran past with a flag cape tied around his neck. Somewhere, people cheered as a parade float turned the corner. The band shifted into "America the Beautiful," and the notes floated through the hot afternoon like a prayer nobody had planned. Ethan did not speak for a long moment. Then he pointed toward a quieter place near the edge of the square, under a maple tree wrapped in string lights that would glow after dark. "Sit there," he said. Emma looked at the bench, then at his wheelchair. "I can stand. I know you can. Sit anyway." She did. Ethan positioned his chair beside the bench, close enough that they were together, but not so close that she would feel trapped. Emma ate slowly, as if the ice cream might disappear if she trusted it too quickly. Ethan watched the crowd while pretending not to watch her. After a while, Emma said, "Did you used to come to things like this?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the courthouse. "Before the accident?" She hesitated. "Yes. Sometimes. Not here. Smaller towns mostly. Places where nobody cared who I was." A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "I used to drive for hours on the 4th of July. No schedule, no security. I would stop wherever the fireworks looked decent." "That sounds nice." It was. The past tense sat between them. Emma looked down at her cup. "Do you miss it?" Ethan almost gave the answer he gave everyone. "No, it doesn't matter." I moved on. But something about the sunlight on Emma's face, something about the careful way she held that cheap paper cup like it had given her back a piece of herself, made lying feel useless. "Yes," he said. Emma did not comfort him. She did not say he would drive again. She did not offer that polished hope people used when they were uncomfortable with grief. She simply nodded. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For the part of you everyone keeps pretending you shouldn't miss." Ethan turned to her. No one had ever said it that way. Doctors spoke about adjustment. His mother spoke about dignity. Business partners spoke about resilience. Strangers spoke about inspiration, as if his wheelchair had turned his life into a speech they could clap for. But Emma had named the thing no one wanted to touch. Loss. Not as weakness, not as shame, just loss. He looked away first. "What would you do?" he asked. "With what?" "If you could leave. If the contract disappeared." Emma's hand tightened around the spoon. The question should have been easy. Freedom was something she thought about every day, yet when he placed it in front of her like a real possibility, her mind went blank. No one had ever asked her what she wanted, without already deciding what she was allowed to answer. "I would rent a room," she said slowly. "A small one. It would not have to be nice. Just mine." Ethan listened. "I would go back to school. Nursing, maybe. I started reading old medical books once when I had to care for Roy after he broke his ankle. I liked knowing what to do when someone was in pain." She stopped, embarrassed by how much she had said. "And?" Ethan asked. Emma gave a shy smile. "I would buy groceries for myself. Not leftovers, not whatever someone else didn't want. I'd choose things because I wanted them." "That's it?" "For some people, choosing breakfast is not small." Ethan looked at the crowd again, but his face had changed. Something hard in him had gone quiet. "No," he said. "I suppose it isn't." Neither of them noticed the black SUV parked half a block away. Inside it, Victor Kane watched from behind tinted glass. He had not expected to see Ethan Whitmore in public. Not like this. Not with only 2 security men, both too relaxed, both scanning the crowd without understanding that danger had already arrived. Victor's mouth curved slightly as he studied the scene. The crippled billionaire in the wheelchair, the maid beside him with melting ice cream in her hands, the crowd thick enough to hide a sin. For 3 years, Victor had hated Ethan Whitmore with the patience of a man who believed revenge was more elegant when delayed. Ethan had beaten him in a deal that ruined his company's expansion and exposed financial tricks Victor had spent years burying. Since then, Victor had lost investors, friends, influence. Men like him could survive losing money. They could not survive humiliation. And now, Ethan had brought himself into the open. No stage, no guards tight enough to matter, no locked gates. Victor lifted his phone. "Now," he said. Near the festival square, a man in a gray jacket stepped away from a hot dog stand and blended into the crowd. Emma did not see him at first. She was laughing. Not loudly, not freely yet, but enough that Ethan noticed. A small laugh escaped her when a little boy dropped his paper hat into a puddle of melted snow cone syrup and saluted it like a fallen soldier. His father played along. placing a hand over his heart while the mother took pictures. Emma laughed before remembering to stop herself. Ethan stared. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "You laughed." "I'm allowed to laugh. I wasn't sure you knew that." She looked at him for a moment, then smiled again, softer this time. "I'm learning." The parade began moving past the square. Veterans in uniform rode in vintage cars. Firefighters tossed candy to children from a red truck. A high school marching band followed, brass flashing in the sun. The crowd pressed closer to the street. Emma stood and moved behind Ethan's chair, instinctively making space, one hand resting near the handle. A sharp crack sounded overhead. Not a gunshot, a test firework from the riverfront. The crowd cheered. At the same time, people surged forward. Ethan's security men were forced apart by a group of teenagers waving flags. One of them tried to push through, but a stroller blocked him. The other turned to answer a question from a police officer who had recognized Ethan and stepped in at the worst possible moment. The man in the gray jacket came closer. Emma felt it before she understood it. Maybe it was the way he moved against the flow of the crowd. Maybe it was his eyes, fixed not on the parade but on Ethan. Maybe it was the hand hidden too carefully inside his jacket despite the heat. Emma had spent her life around men who smiled before hurting people. She knew the shape of danger when it walked toward her. "Ethan," she said. He turned slightly. "What?" "We need to move." Before he could answer, the man lunged. The knife flashed once in the sunlight. Ethan saw the blade too late. His hands moved toward the wheels, but the crowd had pinned his chair at an angle. He could not turn fast enough. He could not stand. He could not do anything but watch death come toward him through a sea of flags and smiling strangers. Emma did not think. There was no heroic speech in her mind, no plan, no calculation, only the sudden certainty that Ethan Whitmore, cold and wounded and impossible, was about to die in front of her. She threw herself between them. The impact knocked the breath from her body. For one suspended second, the whole world seemed to stop. The music blurred, the parade colors smeared into red, white, and blue streaks. Emma felt Ethan's hand catch her arm, felt the paper cups slip from her fingers, felt the ice cream hit the pavement and spread beneath their feet like a small ruined flag. Then the pain arrived, a deep, burning pain that stole her voice. "Emma?" Ethan's voice sounded far away. She looked down and saw blood spreading across the front of her uniform. The crowd screamed. The attacker tried to pull back, but Ethan grabbed his wrist with a force no one expected from a man in a wheelchair. His face was no longer cold. It was terrifying. One of the security men slammed into the attacker from the side, taking him to the ground as people scattered around them. Emma's knees failed. Ethan caught her as much as he could, dragging her against him, one arm around her shoulders while his chair shifted beneath the weight. He nearly fell with her. He did not care. "No, no, no," he said, the words breaking apart. "Stay with me." Emma's eyes fluttered. She tried to speak, but only a small breath came out. Above them, the first real fireworks of the evening began early, bursting over the river in bright red sparks. The crowd had mistaken the earlier panic for confusion, until the blood made the truth impossible to ignore. Parents pulled children away. Sirens began somewhere in the distance. Someone shouted for a medic. Someone else cried into a phone. Ethan pressed his hand against Emma's wound. "Look at me," he ordered. She tried. Her face was pale now, her lashes trembling. Even like this, even bleeding in his arms, she looked more worried for him than for herself. "Are you hurt?" she whispered. The question destroyed him. "Don't you dare ask me that," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "Don't you dare." Emma's mouth moved into the smallest, saddest smile. "You took me outside," she breathed. "I wanted you to see it too." His throat closed. The sirens grew louder. A police officer pushed through the crowd. The security men were shouting. The attacker was face down on the pavement, but Ethan saw none of it clearly. He saw only Emma, the girl who had been treated like property, the girl who cried over ice cream because no one had ever bought her something just for herself, the girl who had stepped in front of a knife meant for him. "Stay awake," he said. "Emma, stay awake." But her eyes were already closing. Ethan held her tighter, as if his arms could anchor her to the world. Around them, America celebrated freedom with thunder in the sky. And on the ground beneath the fireworks, Ethan Whitmore bent over the maid everyone thought was replaceable and screamed her name like she was the only person he had left. After Ethan Whitmore screamed Emma's name beneath the fireworks, the rest of the night became a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and blood on his hands. The ambulance doors slammed shut in front of him, but Ethan refused to stay behind. One of his security men tried to stop him, saying the hospital would be faster if they cleared the route first. Ethan looked at him with a face so cold it silenced the man in half a second. "I'm going with her." There was no discussion after that. Inside the ambulance, Emma lay pale, and still beneath the harsh white lights. The paramedic pressed gauze against her wound, while another checked her pulse, and called numbers Ethan did not understand. He had spent years sitting in boardrooms where one wrong decision could cost millions of dollars, but none of that had prepared him for the terror of watching one fragile heartbeat decide whether a person stayed in the world. Emma's hand hung near the edge of the stretcher. Ethan reached for it. Her fingers were cold. He wanted to tell her she was foolish. He wanted to tell her she should have run. He wanted to order her to wake up because ordering people was the only language fear had ever taught him. But when he opened his mouth, nothing came out except one broken sentence. "Don't leave." At Whitmore Memorial, the emergency team was already waiting. Doctors rushed Emma through double doors, and Ethan was stopped at the line only patients and medical staff could cross. He sat there in his wheelchair, staring at the place where she had disappeared, his palms covered in her blood. For the first time since the accident, he hated the chair not because people stared at it, but because it kept him from following her. "Mr. Whitmore." A doctor approached him, speaking quickly and carefully. Emma had lost a dangerous amount of blood. The blade had gone deep. It had missed the worst place by less than an inch, but there was internal bleeding. They were taking her into surgery. Ethan heard every word. He understood none of it. "Save her," he said. "We'll do everything we can." "No." His voice dropped lower. "You will save her." The doctor held his eyes for a moment, then nodded and went back through the doors. By the time Margaret Whitmore arrived, Ethan had not moved from the hallway. His jacket was stained. His shirt was wrinkled. His face looked carved from stone, except for his eyes. Margaret saw those eyes and stopped. She had seen Ethan angry. She had seen him bitter. She had seen him withdrawn, silent, cruel, proud, ashamed, but she had never seen him afraid like this. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan did not look at her. "She took the knife meant for me." Margaret's lips parted slightly. "Ethan, do not say it. Do not tell me she should not have been there. Do not tell me this is why I should have stayed inside. Do not tell me anything that makes this about reputation." Margaret went silent. Around them, the hospital moved with its usual cold rhythm. Nurses passed, families whispered. An old vending machine hummed near the wall. Somewhere, a child cried. Outside the windows, fireworks still rose over the city, bursting in red and gold above the skyline. As if America had no idea one woman was fighting for her life because she had tried to save a man who did not know how to save himself. Hours passed. Ethan refused food, refused water, refused to change his shirt. When a nurse gently offered to clean the blood from his hands, he stared at them as if he had only just noticed. "It's hers," he said. The nurse softened. "That's why we should clean it." He lit her. Just before dawn, the surgeon came out. Emma was alive. The words struck Ethan so hard he closed his eyes. The surgeon explained that she was stable but unconscious. The next 24 hours would matter. She needed rest, monitoring, and time. Ethan asked for a private room, the best staff, extra security, and the names of every person who had touched her chart. Margaret watched him make the arrangements with the controlled fury of a man trying to rebuild the world around one hospital bed. When Emma was finally moved into a private room, Ethan went in first. She looked smaller than he remembered. Without the maid's uniform, without the tray in her hands, without the quiet strength she carried like armor, Emma seemed painfully young. A bandage wrapped her side beneath the blanket. An IV line ran into her arm. Her hair had been brushed away from her face, and her lips were almost colorless. Ethan stopped beside her bed. For a long time, he did nothing. Then he reached out and adjusted the blanket over her shoulder. "You are terrible at following instructions," he said quietly. "I told you to stay awake." She did not answer. He pulled his wheelchair closer and stayed. By morning, Margaret returned to the room and found him still there. His head was bowed, one hand resting near Emma's but not quite touching it, as if he did not believe he had the right. The sight unsettled her more than the blood had. "She will have nurses," Margaret said. "I know. You need rest. So does she. You cannot sit here forever." Ethan looked up. "Watch me." Margaret's expression tightened. She glanced at Emma, then back at her son. There was something in the room that had not existed before the festival. Something Margaret could not command away. Emma Bennett had entered the Whitmore house as a paid caretaker, a girl bound by a contract, someone expected to serve quietly and disappear when no longer useful. But Ethan was looking at her as if the whole world had narrowed down to whether she opened her eyes. That frightened Margaret. Over the next 2 days, Ethan became two different men. When doctors entered the room, he was cold, precise, and impossible. He asked about blood pressure, infection risk, pain management, surgery notes, recovery time. He corrected schedules. He demanded answers. He made hospital administrators nervous without raising his voice. But when the room was empty, he changed. He lowered the blinds when the sun hit Emma's face. He asked a nurse which lip balm would help because her mouth looked dry. He learned how to press the call button before the machines could scare him. At night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the city grew quiet outside the window, he spoke to her. "Not much. Never anything too soft. You still owe me an explanation," he said once. "No one jumps in front of a knife for a man who has been rude to her since the day she arrived." Another night, after midnight, he stared at her still face and whispered, "You cried over ice cream. I should have bought you every flavor." Emma did not wake, but sometimes her fingers moved. Sometimes her breathing changed when he said her name. And once, when a nurse suggested he go home, Emma's hand shifted slightly against the blanket, as if searching for something. Ethan saw it. He moved closer and let his fingers touch hers. "I'm here," he said. The movement stopped. On the third morning, rain tapped softly against the hospital window. Ethan had fallen asleep for less than an hour, his head tilted back against the wheelchair, exhaustion finally stronger than pride. A faint sound woke him. A breath. Not the rhythm of a machine. A human breath trying to become a word. He opened his eyes. Emma was looking at him. For 1 second, Ethan could not move. He had imagined this moment so many times that when it finally came, he almost did not trust it. Then her lips moved. "Are you hurt?" The question hit him exactly where the knife had failed to. Ethan's face hardened at once, because if he let it soften, he knew something inside him would break beyond repair. "You wake up from surgery," he said, voice rough. "And that is your first question?" Emma blinked slowly. "You were bleeding. That was your blood." "Oh." She seemed to think about that, weak and dazed, then whispered, "That's not good." A sound almost like laughter escaped him, but it hurt too much to become one. He turned away for a moment, collecting himself, rebuilding the wall she kept walking through without permission. "You are going to recover," he said. "The doctors are confident." "Were you here?" "No." Emma's eyes moved slowly around the room. She saw his jacket folded over the chair, the untouched coffee cups, the blanket someone had placed across his knees, the dark shadows beneath his eyes, the wheel marks on the floor beside her bed. She looked back at him. "You're a bad liar, Ethan." It was the first time she had said his name in the hospital. He looked at her sharply, but she was too weak to be afraid of him. Before he could answer, the door opened. Margaret stood in the doorway, perfectly dressed, perfectly still. She had heard the last sentence. More than that, she had seen Ethan's face when Emma said his name. She saw the relief he tried to hide, the tenderness he turned into anger, the fear he disguised as control. And in that moment, Margaret Whitmore understood the danger was no longer Victor Kane, or scandal, or gossip, or a knife in a crowd. The danger was the girl in the hospital bed. Because Ethan Whitmore had not simply become grateful to Emma Bennett. He had fallen in love with her. Margaret stepped back from the doorway without making a sound. And as Ethan leaned closer to adjust Emma's pillow, his mother made a silent decision in the hall. If Emma Bennett survived, she would have to be removed from his life before Ethan chose her over everything his family had built. After Margaret Whitmore saw Ethan lean over Emma's hospital bed with a tenderness he tried to hide, she understood the girl had not only survived the knife, Emma had reached a place in her son's heart that no doctor, therapist, or family name had been able to reach. To Margaret, that made her dangerous. 6 days later, Emma returned to the Whitmore mansion. Ethan had arranged a private nurse, daily medical checks, scheduled medication, and tighter security. But one decision froze Margaret's smile. Emma would no longer recover in the tiny staff room near the laundry area. She would stay in the guest room across from Ethan's suite. "She is an employee," Margaret said. "She is the reason I'm alive," Ethan replied. "That does not make her family." "No, but it makes her someone this family owes more than a closet with a bed." Since Ethan's accident, Margaret had controlled his world and called it protection. Now Ethan was choosing without her, and every choice led back to Emma. That afternoon, Emma entered through the front door. She wore a loose blouse over the bandage at her side and carried a small hospital bag with nearly everything she owned. Outside, workers were taking down the last 4th of July flags. The symbols of freedom were being folded away while Emma, who had almost died for one taste of it, crossed the marble floor in silence. Ethan waited near the staircase. "You should have used the side entrance," he said. "Why? It's closer to the elevator. Less walking." Emma almost smiled. That was concern pretending to be in order. Ethan looked away first. From the balcony, Margaret saw the softening he could not hide. Ethan Whitmore, who had once refused the world, had come downstairs for a maid. And when that maid spoke to him without fear, he listened. That was when Margaret decided Emma Bennett had to leave. For the next few days, the mansion changed around Emma in ways she did not know how to trust. Her new room had white blankets, a garden window, and flowers she had not asked for. Meals arrived on trays instead of leftovers from the kitchen. When Emma tried to carry one tray downstairs, Ethan stopped her because of her stitches. She said she had worked through worse pain, and his face darkened. "That is not something you should say like it's normal." He took the tray from her awkwardly, dropped a spoon, and blamed the spoon for being poorly balanced. Emma laughed before she could stop herself, a quiet sound that surprised them both. At the end of the hallway, Margaret heard that laugh. To her, it sounded like the beginning of losing her son. That evening, Ethan came to Emma's room with medical notes he pretended were the reason for being there. Emma sat near the window, wrapped in a blue blanket, trying to eat soup. When he noticed she hated it, she admitted she wanted grilled cheese with tomato soup. 20 minutes later, the chef sent it up, cut into triangles. "No one has ever asked how I wanted food before," Emma said. Ethan's voice changed. That should not be the first time. Outside, America was moving on from Independence Day. The country had finished celebrating freedom, but Emma was still learning what one free choice tasted like. Ethan stayed longer than he meant to. Emma finally asked why he was really there. He looked toward the window and answered like a man confessing something he did not know how to carry. "Because when I thought you were going to die, I could not breathe." In the hallway, Margaret heard enough. The next morning, she called Charles Mercer, the Whitmore family attorney. He arrived with a leather folder and the careful expression of a man who had spent his life making ugly things sound legal. "I want Emma Bennett removed," Margaret said. "Has she violated the agreement? She has become inappropriate. That is not a contract term. Do not play word games with me." Charles opened the folder. The agreement was signed by Roy Bennett. The language is unusual. Margaret knew what he meant. The contract had never been meant for a courtroom. It had been written when Ethan needed permanent care, and she wanted someone bound tightly enough not to leave, not to speak, and not to embarrass the family. Roy Bennett had taken the money easily. Emma's consent had been treated like a minor detail. Still, fear was louder than conscience. "Contact Roy," Margaret said. "Tell him I'll pay him double if he takes her away quietly. Ethan will be told she chose to leave." Roy Bennett came to the mansion just before sunset. He entered through the service gate in a cheap brown jacket, wearing a smile that made Emma's body remember fear before her mind did. She was in the kitchen preparing tea. The moment she heard his voice, her hand tightened around the kettle. "Well," Roy said. "Living upstairs now." Emma set the kettle down. "Why are you here?" "To take you home. This is my place of work. This is where I placed you. Now I'm placing you somewhere else. I'm recovering," the doctor said. "I don't care what the doctor said." The cook glanced between them, then quietly left. Emma wished anyone would stay. Roy lowered his voice. "You got comfortable. Fancy room, fancy food, a billionaire looking at you like you matter. Don't talk about him." Roy's eyes brightened with cruel understanding. "So that's it? You think he loves you?" Emma said nothing. "Girls like you do not marry men like Ethan Whitmore. They comfort them when they're lonely. Then they get thrown away when the family remembers what they are." "That's not true. His mother thinks it is." Roy pulled a thick envelope from his jacket and tapped it against his palm. "She paid me to remove a problem." The word struck Emma harder than she expected. She had believed saving Ethan might make her human in Margaret's eyes. It had not. Roy leaned closer. "You're coming with me," quietly. "No." The word surprised them both. Roy grabbed her arm. Pain shot through her side, and she gasped. "You listen to me," he hissed. "I fed you. I clothed you. I signed that contract. You owe me every breath you take. I do not owe you my life. You don't have a life unless I say you do." Emma tried to pull away, but she was still weak. Roy's fingers dug into her arm. "If you fight me, I will tell every reporter in this city that you seduced a disabled billionaire for money. I will ruin him, and I will ruin you." Emma's eyes filled, but she did not cry. Roy smiled again. There she is, the smart girl who knows when to obey. Upstairs, Ethan was trapped in a physical therapy session he hated. When the session ended, he rolled toward Emma's room. Her door was open. The room was empty. Her medication still sat on the bedside table. The book he had ordered for her lay open by the window. The blue blanket was folded over the chair. Her old shoes were under the bed. Emma owned almost nothing, and she had left behind the few things she used every day. On the pillow sat a white handkerchief. Ethan recognized it immediately. In the hospital, he had used it to wipe her shaking fingers dry after she spilled water. She had teased him for carrying something old-fashioned. He had called it practical, not sentimental. Now it looked like a goodbye from someone who had not been allowed to speak. His stomach turned. "Emma?" No answer. Within minutes, the mansion moved under his command. Staff searched the hallways. Security checked the garden. The nurse confirmed Emma had missed her medication. The cook, pale and nervous, admitted Roy Bennett had been in the kitchen. Then Margaret appeared. Too calm. "She left with her father," Margaret said. Ethan stared at her. Why would she do that? Because she wanted to leave. "No, you are upset." "I understand." "No," Ethan repeated. "You don't." "She left her medicine," he said. "She left her shoes. She left the book she asked me to read with her." Margaret's expression faltered. Ethan rolled closer. "What did you do?" "I protected you. From the woman who took a knife. For me, from a woman who was forgetting her place." "Her place," Ethan said. "She is not your equal. She is a maid bound by a contract. You are lonely, grateful, and vulnerable. That is not love. That is weakness." Ethan looked at his mother for a long moment. "You call it weakness because you have never understood love that does not control." He turned away and went to his study. For the next hour, Ethan did not shout. He became precise. He ordered every security recording from the service gate, checked the visitor log, and reviewed the camera footage himself. On the screen, Roy pulled Emma through the back hallway with one hand locked around her arm. Emma looked pale and unsteady. At the door, she turned once toward the east wing. Toward him. Then his accountant found the transfer, a large payment from Margaret's private account to a company connected to Roy Bennett. His mother had bought Emma's disappearance. Margaret entered quietly. "Ethan, let this end. She is not worth destroying yourself over." At that, Ethan looked back. The wounded son was still there. The man in the wheelchair was still there too. But beneath both was the billionaire the business world had once feared. "You can buy silence," he said. "You can buy lawyers, gates, contracts, and men like Roy Bennett, but you cannot buy the truth once I have seen it. He picked up his phone. I want Roy Bennett found. Track his truck, his phone, his cards, every camera from here to the county line. Call the police, but tell my lawyers first. I want no mistake that lets him walk away. His voice lowered. And I want Emma back. Margaret whispered. She chose to go. Ethan looked at the frozen image on the screen. Emma turning toward the house, her face full of fear and farewell. No, he said. She was taken. For the first time since the accident, Ethan Whitmore did not care who saw him leave the mansion. Emma had once stepped in front of a knife for him in a crowd full of strangers. Now he would tear through the city in a wheelchair if that was what it took to find her. And somewhere beyond the Whitmore gates, in the back seat of Roy Bennett's old truck, Emma pressed one trembling hand against her healing wound and watched the mansion disappear behind her. She did not cry. Not yet. Because crying would mean she believed someone was coming. And after a lifetime of being sold, signed away, and dragged from one cage to another, Emma Bennett had almost forgotten what it felt like to be worth finding. While Emma Bennett sat in the back of Roy's truck, trying not to believe anyone would come for her, Ethan Whitmore was already turning the city into a map of where she might have been taken. The moment his vehicle rolled past the Whitmore gates, Ethan stopped being the man who avoided the world. He did not care who saw him in a wheelchair, or who whispered, or how much pain the road sent through his body. Emma had once stepped in front of a knife for him. Now distance, pride, and fear meant nothing. If Roy Bennett had dragged her into the dark, Ethan would follow until the dark broke open. In the SUV, Ethan worked with a laptop across his knees. Marcus Reed, his head of security, sat beside him with two phones. Roy's truck left the North Service Road at 6:14, Marcus said. Then it disappeared near the industrial district. No cameras? Not for 7 blocks. Then he knew where to go. Marcus glanced at him, or someone told him. Ethan's jaw tightened. He did not say Margaret's name. He did not have to. His mother kept calling, then texted, "Come home before this becomes public." He deleted it. Public was what she feared. Not Emma's wound, not Roy's hand on Emma's arm. Margaret feared witnesses. Ethan feared arriving too late. Across the city, Roy's truck pulled behind an old motel near the river. The sign outside blinked in broken red letters. Half the rooms looked abandoned. Roy pulled Emma from the truck before she was ready. Pain cut through her side, and she nearly fell. "Move," he snapped. "I need my medication. You need to stop acting like a rich man's pet." He pushed her into room 12, locked the door, and took her phone. The room was narrow and stale, with yellow curtains, a sagging bed, and a bathroom door that did not close all the way. Emma backed toward the wall. "You can't keep me here." Roy laughed. "I kept you for 20 years. The sentence hit strangely. Not raised, not cared for, kept. Emma pressed one hand against her bandage. "What are you going to do with me?" Roy took a drink from a small bottle. "You sign what I tell you to sign. I got a man in Nevada who needs live-in help, quiet work, good money." Emma's blood turned cold. "You're selling me again." Again. The word hung in the room between them. No baby pictures, no real relatives, no story of her birth that ever stayed the same. And always Roy's warning, "Never let anyone see the mark on your shoulder." "What did you mean when you said you kept me?" she whispered. Roy stood too fast. "I said sleep." "What did you mean?" He slammed his hand against the wall. "I meant you were nothing when I found you." "Found?" Emma stopped breathing. Roy realized his mistake. He grabbed his bottle and went into the bathroom, cursing. When the water started running, Emma looked at his jacket on the chair, a folded paper stuck from the inside pocket. She moved slowly, each step pulling at her wound, and slipped the paper free. It was several pages folded together, a birth certificate with dates that looked wrong, a document with Roy's signature, and an old newspaper clipping. "Missing toddler vanishes during 4th of July festival." Emma's fingers trembled. The clipping showed a blurry photograph of a little girl with dark curls, wearing a white dress with blue stars. The article named her as Emma Grace Ashford, daughter of Richard and Helen Ashford. She had disappeared from a crowded Independence Day celebration when she was 2 years old. Police suspected abduction. Emma read the name again. Emma Grace Ashford. The water stopped. She tried to fold the papers back, but Roy came out and saw them in her hand. For one awful second, neither of them moved. Then he lunged. Emma stepped back too quickly. Pain burned through her side. Roy ripped the papers away and shoved them into his pocket. "You had no right," he growled. "No right?" Emma's voice broke. "That is my life. It's a newspaper story. Am I Emma Ashford?" Roy stared at her. "Answer me." He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You were a crying little thing at a festival. People everywhere. Nobody watching close enough. It was easy." Emma felt the room tilt. "No. Your real daddy had money. I was going to collect the reward at first. Then I realized a kid was worth more if nobody knew where she was." The cruelty was so plain that Emma could not understand it at first. Her knees weakened. She held the dresser to stay upright. "You stole me. I raised you. You sold me. I kept you alive. You made me believe no one wanted me." Roy's face hardened. "Nobody came fast enough, did they?" That almost destroyed her. He had told a stolen child she had been abandoned, then used her gratitude as a leash. But Emma did not collapse. "My parents looked for me," she said. Roy grabbed her arm. "Your parents are the people who can afford to pay. That is all parents are." Outside, tires screeched in the lot. Roy froze. A vehicle door slammed. Blue and red light flashed against the dirty curtains. Not fireworks this time. Police. Roy dragged Emma toward the bathroom. Not a word. But the motel door burst open before he could move farther. Marcus Reed came in first with 2 officers behind him. Roy wrapped an arm around Emma and used her body as a shield. She cried out when pressure hit her wound. Then Ethan appeared in the doorway. He had come in his wheelchair over cracked concrete and broken pavement. His face was pale from the effort, but his eyes were locked on Emma. For a moment, she forgot Roy's arm. She forgot the motel. She forgot pain. He came. Ethan saw the blood staining her bandage. His voice became ice. "Let her go." Roy sneered. "She is my daughter." "No," Emma said. Everyone looked at her. The word was not loud, but it changed the room. Roy tightened his grip. "Shut up." Emma lifted her chin, trembling but standing. "He is not my father." Ethan's eyes moved to her face. He understood before anyone explained. Roy shoved Emma aside and ran for the bathroom window. Marcus caught him before he made it 3 steps. The officers forced him to the floor. Emma slid down against the dresser, one hand pressed to her side. Ethan rolled to her as fast as the small room allowed. "Emma." She looked at him, and all the strength she had held together began to shake. "You came." It was not a question. It was disbelief. Ethan reached for her hand. "Of course I came. People don't." "I do." She started to cry then, not loudly, but enough for him to know that some part of her had finally allowed itself to hope and was terrified by it. "There are papers," she whispered. "In his jacket. A newspaper article. He said he took me. He said my name was Emma Grace Ashford." Ethan went still. He knew that name. Everyone in certain circles knew the Ashford story. The wealthy couple whose toddler vanished from a 4th of July celebration, the missing child case that haunted news specials for years, the foundation created afterward to help missing children's families. Richard and Helen Ashford had never stopped looking. Marcus pulled the papers from Roy's jacket and read the clipping. His face darkened. Ethan looked back at Emma. "Do you have a birthmark?" Emma swallowed. "Behind my left shoulder. Roy always told me to cover it." The article had mentioned a star-shaped birthmark. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, his voice was quieter. "Emma, this may be the way home." She stared at him, as if the word home belonged to another language. Paramedics checked her wound. The stitches had pulled, but she was stable. Ethan refused to let them take her alone. As they moved Emma out of the motel, she saw Roy being pushed into a police car. He looked at her through the window, not with regret, but with rage that his possession had been taken from him. For the first time in her life, Emma did not look away. At the hospital, Ethan's lawyers worked faster than the police paperwork. The clipping was scanned. The forged birth certificate was photographed. Roy's records were pulled. Within hours, The investigator confirmed the possibility. Emma Ashford had vanished 24 years ago from an Independence Day celebration less than 200 miles away. The child had a distinctive star-shaped birthmark behind her left shoulder. The Ashford family had kept the case open every year. Emma listened from the hospital bed in silence. She should have felt joy. Instead, she felt hollow. If Richard and Helen Ashford were her parents, then everything she knew had been built on a theft. Her name, her childhood, her fear, even the guilt Roy used to control her. "What if they don't want me now?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her, stunned. "I'm not a child anymore," Emma said. "I'm not the girl in that picture. What if they remember her, but they don't know me?" Ethan moved closer. "You are not proof of his crime," he said. "You are proof that he did not get to erase you." Tears slipped down her face. Ethan did not wipe them away without permission. He only held out his hand, and this time Emma reached for it first. Later that night, Marcus entered the room with a folder. "We reached the Ashford's attorney," he said. "Richard and Helen are alive. They live in Boston now. They were told there may be a development in Emma's case." Emma's breath caught. "What did they say?" Marcus looked at her gently. "They are flying here tonight." The room became impossibly quiet. For 24 years, Emma had believed she belonged to a man who used her like a debt. Now, two strangers who might have loved her before she could remember were crossing the country because of a birthmark Roy had forced her to hide. Ethan squeezed her hand once. Emma looked at him. "I'm scared." "I know. What if this changes everything?" His face softened, just barely. "Maybe everything deserves to change." Outside the hospital window, the city lights stretched far into the dark. Somewhere behind them was the motel where her old life had cracked open. Somewhere beyond that was the mansion where a contract had called her property. And somewhere in the night sky, a plane was carrying a mother and father who had never stopped searching for a child the world had told them to mourn. Emma closed her eyes, but she did not sleep. For the first time, the past was not only a cage behind her. It was a door in front of her. And by morning, when Richard and Helen Ashford walked through that door, Emma Bennett would have to face the most terrifying possibility of all, that she had never been unwanted, only stolen. By morning, Emma Bennett was no longer only waiting for medical results. She was waiting for strangers who might have loved her before she even knew her own name. The hospital room felt too quiet. Ethan sat beside the window in his wheelchair, one hand resting on the armrest, his eyes moving between Emma and the door. He had not left all night. Marcus Reed stood outside with two officers because Roy Bennett was now in custody, and the story he had buried for 24 years was beginning to rise like something that had never truly died. Emma lay against the pillows, pale from pain and exhaustion. The wound in her side had been cleaned again, the stitches reinforced, but the place that hurt most was not beneath the bandage. It was somewhere deeper, somewhere Roy had been cutting into since she was a child. Emma Grace Ashford. She repeated the name silently. It sounded beautiful. It sounded impossible. It sounded like a life that had belonged to another girl, a girl in a white dress with blue stars, a girl who had parents who searched for her, a girl who had been missed. Emma did not know how to become that girl. A soft knock came at the door. Ethan looked at her. "You don't have to do this right now." Emma's fingers tightened around the blanket. "If I wait, I'll be scared longer." He nodded once and turned his chair toward the door. "Come in." Richard and Helen Ashford entered like people walking into a church where grief had been waiting for them. Richard was tall, silver-haired, and carefully composed, but his face carried the exhaustion of a man who had spent more than 2 decades refusing to bury hope. Helen stood beside him with one hand over her heart. She had elegant features, soft gray eyes, and a tremor in her mouth she could not hide. The moment she saw Emma, her breath broke. For a second, no one spoke. Emma stared at them, searching their faces for something familiar. She wanted a memory to rise, a voice, a smell, a lullaby, anything. But all she felt was fear and a strange pull in her chest, as if some part of her body recognized what her mind could not. Helen took one step forward, then stopped herself. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't want to frighten you." That alone almost made Emma cry. Roy had never stopped himself from frightening her. Richard held a folder against his chest. We were told there was evidence, a clipping, a birthmark, possible forged documents. His voice was steady, but his hand shook. Emma nodded. I don't remember anything. Helen pressed her lips together. You were two. You shouldn't have had to remember. The kindness in that sentence hurt. A doctor came in with a nurse and explained what had to be done. DNA testing would confirm what the article and birthmark suggested. It would take some time, though Ethan had already paid for the fastest possible processing through a private lab. No one in the room objected. There were some truths no one wanted to wait for, even when they were terrifying. When the nurse gently asked to see the birthmark, Emma froze. For years, Roy had told her never to show it. He said it was ugly. He said people would ask questions. He said good girls kept themselves covered. Now the mark he had made her hide might be the only proof that she had once belonged to someone who loved her. Emma looked at Ethan. He immediately turned his chair away, giving her privacy without making a performance of it. Helen noticed. So did Richard. The nurse helped Emma shift the blouse from her left shoulder. Behind it, just below the curve of her shoulder blade, was a small star-shaped birthmark, faded brown against her skin. Helen made a sound that was not quite a sob. Richard closed his eyes. She had it, Helen said, voice breaking. Our baby had it. Emma pulled the fabric back up quickly, overwhelmed. Helen did not rush to touch her. She stood where she was, crying silently, her hands clasped as if she was afraid that reaching too fast would make Emma disappear again. I used to kiss that little mark after her bath, Helen whispered. I told her it meant she had a piece of the night sky on her shoulder. Emma covered her mouth. Roy had called it ugly. Her mother had called it a star. That difference opened something inside her, so suddenly she could barely breathe. The DNA results came late that afternoon. By then, the room had changed in strange and careful ways. Helen had asked permission before sitting beside the bed. Richard had asked Emma if she wanted water, then waited for her answer instead of assuming. They did not crowd her. They did not demand that she feel anything. They spoke about small things first. Boston, rain, the Ashford Foundation, the way Helen hated hospital coffee, the way Richard still carried an old photograph of his daughter in his wallet. When he showed it to Emma, his hand trembled. The little girl in the picture had dark curls, round cheeks, and eyes that looked painfully like Emma's. Emma touched the edge of the photograph, but not the face. What was she like? She asked. Helen smiled through tears. Stubborn, sweet. She hated peas, loved music. If we put her down, she would try to run before she could walk properly. Richard gave a broken laugh. She once threw a shoe into a fountain because I told her we had to leave the park. Emma listened like someone hearing a story about a ghost. I don't feel like her, she said. Helen's face softened. You don't have to. You are not required to become our memory. You are allowed to be who you became and still be our daughter. Those words were almost too generous to trust. When the doctor returned with the official report, everyone stood except Emma. The doctor looked first at her, not at the Ashfords, not at Ethan, not at the security team. The results confirm a biological parent-child relationship. Richard and Helen Ashford are your parents. The room went silent. Emma stared at the paper in the doctor's hand. There it was, a truth with signatures, a life returned in black ink. Helen covered her mouth and cried openly. Richard turned away for a moment, one hand pressed against his eyes. Ethan looked down, his jaw tight, as if relief was something he had to survive quietly. Emma did not move. For 24 years, she had believed she was unwanted, difficult, unlucky, a burden Roy had been forced to carry. Now strangers with her eyes and her blood were crying because she had been found. I'm sorry, Emma whispered. Helen looked up quickly. No, I don't know why I said that. Because someone taught you to apologize for existing, Helen said, and there was a quiet fury in her voice now. That ends today. Richard stepped closer, but still did not touch her without permission. Emma, he said carefully, we cannot give back what was stolen. I would trade everything I own to do that, but I can't. What I can do is promise you this. No one will ever own your life again. Emma broke then. Not loudly, Not dramatically. She simply bent forward and cried like a person whose body had been waiting years for permission. Helen moved slowly, giving her time to pull away. Emma did not. So Helen wrapped her arms around her daughter for the first time in 24 years. Ethan turned his chair toward the window. Not because he did not care, because he cared enough to let the moment belong to Emma. 2 days later, Emma left the hospital with the Ashfords. Ethan did not ask her to return to the Whitmore mansion. He did not remind her of what he had done. He did not say that he had found her, protected her, or stayed at her bedside. He understood now that love could not become another contract. If Emma's first real freedom led her away from him, then the only honest thing he could do was let the door stay open without standing in front of it. Before she left, Emma asked to see him alone. He was in the hospital garden, beneath a small maple tree, pretending to read a message on his phone. "You're avoiding me," she said. "I am giving you space." That sounds noble. It is mostly painful. She smiled sadly and sat on the bench beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "My parents want me to go to Boston with them," she said. Ethan nodded. "You should. You don't know what I should do." "No, but I know what Roy never allowed you to have. Distance, safety, a choice that is not shaped by fear." Emma looked at him. "And what about you?" His face closed slightly. "I will be fine." "You're a bad liar, Ethan." He almost smiled. Then she asked the question that frightened her most. "If I go, will you think I abandoned you?" Ethan looked at her then, and the truth in his eyes hurt more than any lie would have. "I will miss you," he said, "but I would rather miss you free than keep you close because you feel guilty." Emma's eyes filled. That was the difference between Ethan and every person who had tried to control her. Roy had kept her with fear. Margaret had tried to remove her with money. Ethan loved her and still opened his hand. Emma went to Boston. For the first time in her life, she slept in a room chosen for her by people who had waited years to bring her home. The Ashford house was warm, not cold like the Whitmore mansion. There were family photographs everywhere, including the old ones that hurt to see and new empty frames Helen said Emma could fill whenever she wanted. Her closet held clothes she had not earned by serving anyone. Her desk held brochures for nursing programs. Her name was on documents that no longer made her property. Emma Grace Ashford. The world changed around her quickly. Lawyers reopened the kidnapping case. Roy's forged documents were connected to other suspicious arrangements. His so-called contracts were investigated. The story reached the press, but Richard protected Emma from cameras. Helen sat with her during nightmares. For the first time, Emma learned that being cared for did not always come with a price. Still, freedom scared her. When Helen asked what she wanted for breakfast, Emma froze over 3 choices. When Richard offered to buy her a car, she said she did not know how to drive. When a college advisor asked what schedule she preferred, Emma nearly cried because no one had ever asked her to prefer anything. At night, she thought of Ethan. She thought of him in the hospital garden, letting her go. She thought of the first ice cream, the fallen spoon, the way he had come for her when she no longer believed she was worth finding. She thought of his wheelchair, not with pity, but with tenderness, because she knew he had a prison too, and he was trying to live beyond it. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to the Whitmore mansion and found it unbearable. Emma's room was empty again, but this time it was not because someone had stolen her. This time she had chosen to leave, and Ethan forced himself to respect that even when it hurt. He returned to physical therapy with a focus that surprised everyone. He stopped hiding from cameras. He attended one board meeting in person, wheelchair and all, and when someone stared too long, he stared back until they looked away. Margaret watched him change and understood too late that losing control had not destroyed him. It had made him stronger. When she learned Emma was confirmed as Richard and Helen Ashford's daughter, Margaret locked herself in her room for an hour. The girl she had called inappropriate, the girl she had paid Roy to remove, was not a nobody. She was the daughter of one of the most respected families in Boston, but the shame that followed was deeper than social embarrassment. Margaret knew the truth. Emma's worth had not changed. Only Margaret's ability to see it had. 3 weeks after arriving in Boston, Emma received a package. Inside was a small paper cup from the festival vendor, cleaned and preserved in a clear box. along with a note in Ethan's handwriting. You once told me you did not know what to do when something was only yours. I hope your freedom feels that way now. No demand, no confession, no request. Just a reminder. Emma held the note for a long time. That evening, she walked downstairs where Richard and Helen were having tea. Her parents looked up immediately, still learning the shape of having an adult daughter in the house. I want to go back to New York, Emma said. Helen's smile faded with concern. To the Whitmore mansion? Yes. Richard set down his cup. Because you feel you owe Ethan. Emma shook her head. No, that is why I know I'm ready to go. I don't owe him. I love him. Helen's eyes softened. Emma took a breath. For the first time, I can choose any life I want, and I choose to tell him that. Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Then we go with you. When Emma returned to the Whitmore estate, she did not wear a maid's uniform. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair down, her shoulders straight. Richard and Helen stood behind her, not as owners, not as rescuers, but as parents ready to support whatever choice she made. The staff at the door looked stunned. No one knew whether to call her Miss Bennet, Miss Ashford, or something else entirely. Emma did not wait for them to decide. She walked into the foyer where she had once stood carrying trays, lowering her eyes, apologizing for taking up space. This time, Ethan was at the base of the staircase. He looked at her, as if he had imagined this moment too many times to trust it. Emma, he said. She smiled, nervous and brave. It's Grace, technically. His expression flickered. Do you want me to call you that? She looked around the mansion that had once been her cage, then back at the man who had helped her find the door without forcing her through it. Not yet, she said. Emma found her way back here. Grace is still learning how to live. Ethan swallowed. Why did you come back? Emma stepped closer. Because I'm free now, she said. And this time, if I stay beside you, it will not be because of a contract, fear, debt, or pity. His hands tightened on the wheels of his chair. Then why? Emma's eyes shone, but she did not look away. Because I choose you. For a moment, the mansion was silent. Then Margaret Whitmore appeared at the top of the stairs, pale, motionless, watching the girl she had tried to throw away return not as a servant, but as a daughter of the Ashford family, a woman with her own name, her own parents, her own future, and the one thing Margaret had never truly understood, a choice. Emma looked up at her without lowering her head, and in that moment, everyone in the Whitmore mansion understood that the girl who had once been sold by a contract had come back with something no amount of money could buy. Her freedom. After Emma returned to the Whitmore mansion, not as a maid, but as a free woman with her real parents behind her, the foyer became a courtroom without a judge. Margaret Whitmore stood at the top of the staircase. For years, that place had made her look untouchable. From there, she had welcomed donors, dismissed servants, and controlled every room beneath her. But now, looking down at Emma Ashford, she looked like a woman cornered by a truth her money could not erase. Emma did not lower her eyes. That was the first victory. Ethan rolled beside her. Mother, he said, you owe Emma an apology. Margaret's mouth tightened. This is not a place for public scenes. Richard Ashford answered calmly. Then you should have thought of that before paying the man connected to our daughter's abduction to take her away. Margaret went pale. I did not know what Roy Bennett was. No, Helen said, her voice trembling, but you knew what Emma was. A wounded young woman under your roof, trapped by a contract she never freely chose. And you still sent her back to him. For once, Margaret had no elegant answer. Emma stepped forward. Her side still hurt, but her voice did not break. I used to think you hated me because I was poor, she said. Then I found out I was an Ashford, and for 1 second I wondered if that would finally make me good enough. Margaret looked away. But that is not freedom, Emma continued. If my worth changes only because my parents have money, then nothing has changed. I was worthy when I wore your maid's uniform. I was worthy when I slept near the laundry room. I was worthy when I carried Ethan's medicine, and when I bled on the street for him. The mansion fell silent. Emma held Margaret's eyes. You did not fail to see my family name, Mrs. Whitmore. You failed to see me. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheels of his chair. "You told me she was forgetting her place," he said. "The truth is, I forgot mine. I forgot being your son did not mean letting you decide who I was allowed to love." Margaret looked at him, and the wall inside her finally cracked. "I was afraid," she whispered. "After your accident, I thought if I controlled every nurse, every door, every person near you, I could keep you safe. Then I saw the way you looked at her, the way you used to look at life before it hurt you, and I panicked. That does not excuse what you did," Ethan said. "I know." Margaret came down the stairs slowly. Each step took something from her: pride, control, certainty. When she reached Emma, she stopped at a respectful distance. "I am sorry," Margaret said. "Not because you are an Ashford, not because your parents are here. I am sorry because you were a human being in my home, and I treated you like a problem to be removed." Emma listened, but did not rush to forgive her. "I will cooperate with the investigation," Margaret added. "The contract, the payments to Roy, the messages, the names. Your lawyers will have everything tonight." That promise became the first stone to fall. Within days, the story spread across the country. It was not the scandal Margaret had feared about a billionaire and a maid. It was the story of a stolen child, a forged care contract, a criminal posing as a father, and a young woman who had been treated like property until she nearly died, saving the man everyone thought was broken. Roy Bennett's life unraveled first. Investigators connected him to forged papers, fake debts, and other girls trapped by so-called work agreements. The man who had once told Emma nobody wanted her was now facing charges for kidnapping, trafficking, fraud, and coercion. Then came Victor Kane. He had believed the chaos around Emma would hide the truth about the 4th of July attack. Instead, Ethan used every camera, phone record, bank transfer, and witness statement to follow the money back to him. By the end of the week, Victor was arrested outside his office in front of reporters, his expensive suit useless against handcuffs. Ethan watched the news from the Whitmore study. Emma stood beside him, no longer in uniform, no longer waiting for permission to enter. "You did this," he said. Emma shook her head. "No, the truth did. We only stopped running from it." A few days later, reporters gathered outside the Ashford Foundation building in Boston. Emma agreed to make one statement, not because the cameras deserved her pain, but because somewhere, another girl might be trapped by a man like Roy and need to hear that she was not property. Ethan sat beside her. Richard and Helen stood behind her. Margaret, by Emma's choice, stood farther back, not fully forgiven, but present to witness the truth she had once tried to hide. Emma stepped to the microphone. "I was told my life belonged to whoever fed me, paid for me, or signed papers over me," she said. "That was a lie. No contract can make a person property. No amount of money can decide a human being's worth." A reporter raised his hand. "Miss Ashford, who are you now? The missing heiress? The former maid? Ethan Whitmore's girlfriend?" Emma looked at Ethan. Then she looked at her parents. Finally, she faced the cameras. "I am the woman who finally belongs to herself." For one breath, the whole street went quiet. Then cameras flashed like silent fireworks. Ethan reached for her hand, and this time, in front of the country, Emma took it without fear. 1 year after Emma Ashford stood before the cameras and declared that she belonged to herself, America celebrated the 4th of July again. But this time, she was not watching freedom from behind glass. She was standing in the middle of it. The same city that had once swallowed her scream under fireworks now glowed with flags, music, barbecue smoke, and summer light. Children ran through the park with painted faces. Veterans waved from convertibles in the parade. Families spread blankets on the grass and waited for night to fall. Vendors sold lemonade, hot dogs, funnel cakes, and ice cream from carts painted red, white, and blue. Emma stood near the festival square, in a simple white dress, her hair moving softly in the warm evening wind. Behind her were Richard and Helen Ashford, the parents who had spent 24 years searching for her, and 1 year learning how to love the woman she had become, not only the child they had lost. Beside her was Ethan Whitmore. He was still in his wheelchair, but he no longer hid inside it. The world saw him now. Cameras, strangers, curious eyes, none of them could send him back into the dark room where he had once buried himself. He had spent the year in physical therapy, in boardrooms, in hospitals, and in honest conversations he once would have avoided. Some days, he could stand for a few seconds with support. Some days, pain took that victory back. But Ethan had learned something Emma understood better than anyone. Healing was not always the same as becoming who you were before. Sometimes healing meant finally living as who you were now. Roy Bennett was in prison. The contracts he had used to trap vulnerable girls had been exposed. Several women had come forward because Emma had spoken publicly, and the Ashford Foundation had opened a new program to help survivors of coercion, trafficking, and illegal labor agreements. Victor Kane was awaiting trial for ordering the attack that nearly killed Emma. The men who had believed money could turn people into tools were learning, slowly and publicly, that justice could still find them. Margaret Whitmore had changed too. Not quickly, not perfectly, but truly. She no longer stood above people from staircases. She no longer called control protection. That evening, she approached Emma near the edge of the festival, holding a small velvet box. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything," Margaret said. Emma looked at her, calm but cautious. "Then don't ask. Just say what you came to say." Margaret nodded, accepting the boundary without offense. That alone was proof of change. "This belonged to Ethan's grandmother," she said, opening the box to reveal a delicate bracelet. "I once imagined giving it to the woman I thought would fit into our family. I was wrong about what that meant." Emma did not reach for it. Margaret's voice softened. "You do not have to forgive me today. You do not have to forgive me ever. But if you choose to stand beside my son, I want you to know I will not stand in your way again." Ethan watched in silence. Emma looked at the bracelet, then at Margaret. "I don't need your permission to love him." "No," Margaret said. "You don't, but I wanted to give you my respect." That was the first gift from Margaret Whitmore that did not feel like a chain. Emma accepted the box, not as surrender, but as a sign that even broken families could learn humility if truth was strong enough to survive them. As the sun went down, Ethan led Emma back toward the same ice cream cart where everything had changed. The vendor did not recognize them at first. To him, they were only a man in a wheelchair and a woman smiling at a menu painted in bright colors. "What flavor?" Ethan asked. Emma looked at him. "You remember?" "I remember everything about that day." "So do I." His face darkened for a moment, but Emma touched his shoulder. "Not only the knife," she said. "I remember the first bite. I remember thinking something was mine. I remember you asking what I would do if I were free. And now?" The vendor handed them 2 cups, vanilla with strawberries and blueberries, just like before. Emma took hers, and this time her hands did not tremble. "Now I know the answer," she said. "I would study nursing. I would help girls like the one I used to be. I would eat ice cream whenever I wanted. And I would choose the man I love, not because I owe him anything, but because my heart is free enough to choose." Ethan looked up at her, unable to hide what those words did to him. "Emma." She smiled. "Grace, eventually." "Not yet. Not yet. Emma survived the cage. Grace is building the future." He reached for her hand. "Then let me build it with both of you." The first fireworks rose into the darkening sky. Red burst over the river, then gold, then blue. The crowd cheered, children pointed upward, and music swelled through the park. A year ago, fireworks had covered the sound of Emma falling. This year, they lit the sky above her as she stood alive, loved, and unafraid. Ethan did not promise he would walk again. Emma did not promise life would be painless. Neither of them needed a perfect ending to believe in a real one. She leaned down and kissed him gently, right there among the crowd, while America celebrated independence around them. Last year, Emma had lost blood under the fireworks. This year, under that same bright sky, she finally understood that freedom was not only the right to leave, it was the right to stay because no one forced you. If Emma and Ethan's story touched your heart, stay with this channel for more emotional stories about love, justice, and second chances. If you believe Emma was right to choose love after finding her freedom, press 1 inch the comments. If you think she should have left everything behind and started a completely new life, press 0. Don't forget to subscribe, because the next story may begin with pain, but it might end with the kind of truth no one sees coming.